So at the beginning of the summer, I decided to challenge myself and only throw Prodigy discs for the entire summer. I've been playing disc golf for about almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in November. And I've played pretty much recreationally for only about a year. And I started taking disc golf seriously in the winter, spring, and then summer where we are now. And I decided to only throw Prodigy disc because I didn't have too many discs at the time. And whenever I was looking at different companies and seeing like what kind of discs I want to use and learn with, I always saw this talk of like Prodigy discs are kind of on the lower end of companies that are like bigger, and that's what a lot of people say. And I never really understood it. And I try to look at different information, understand why Prodigy is not a great company. The main thing that I found out was, of course, their flashing issue. But other than that, I couldn't really find a good set reason why people weren't liking it. So I decided to only throw Prodigy for this entire summer and see firsthand why this company might be really underrated, or it's true why they get so much hate. And I'll let you know my final opinion at the end of this video. And yeah, let's hop right into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through pretty much all of my discs and kind of tell you what I like about them, what I don't like about them. And I'm going to be very nitpicky here because I am not sponsored. I am just someone who wants to do this challenge and see why Prodigy discs kind of get this, kind of weird name to them and why people don't really want to throw or use them. So starting first, we got my 4 putters. I only have 4 putters, and honestly, I can't really say anything bad about them. This was my first ever Prodigy disc that I got whenever I wanted to do this challenge. It's my putting putter, and it still is, and it still will be. It is the 350G PA2, and it's a really good disc. I have no issues with this. It feels comfortable. The only thing is I might be switching my putter though, because the 350G plastic is maybe not as soft as I wanted it, but I didn't really want to go and buy a different one. So, but yeah, there is zero issues with this disc, and no flashing, no nothing. Holds up really great. Really nice, pretty glidey putter, and also fairly shallow. Not super shallow, but not super deep either, which is good because I have like smaller hands. It's a great, comfortable disc. And I got this disc even before I even really wanted to do this. Like I knew it was in my back of my head. I'm like, hey, do I want to do this? And this disc, I'm like, yeah, let's go for it. So nothing wrong about this disc. Next up is the 300 Soft PA3. This is a very popular mold for putting and throwing in the Prodigy lineup. And to me, the putting grip, I don't love it as much as the PA2. So I just never putted with it. Even though I prefer this plastic, I prefer the mold of the PA2, and I would rather have inconsistency in the plastic that I want rather than the mold. So I still do throw this. It's a great disc. Nothing else wrong with it really. Like I have no issues with the PA3. It doesn't glide as much as the PA2 either. And for me, I'm a pretty spinny putter, and I like that glide. So again, great disc. Now I have 400 PA1 and 750 PA5. I don't bag the PA1 because the PA3 pretty much does the same thing. The PA1 might be just a little bit more stable, but I don't think there's a big enough difference for me to throw one or the other. So I just chose the PA3 because it's just slightly more comfortable in the hand, and also it's 300 soft plastic, so it'll beat in, and then I can just replace it with this without worrying about buying it or anything like that. Great disc, by the way. Zero flashing. So far, all the putters have no flashing on it, which is great. And yeah, seriously, nothing wrong with this disc either. I'll definitely be explaining more issues once I start getting into faster speed discs, but for now, nothing really. Last putter I have, like I mentioned already, PA5 750 plastic. I love this disc. This disc is overall, in terms of diameter, the biggest putter from Prodigy that I own. So it is just literally like, it's like 0.1 centimeters bigger, but even though it's not like, huge, I do notice it. So I'm not going to really putt with it because it's also a little bit too unstable to putt. But for a throwing putter, this is one of my favorites that I've ever thrown for any company. I like understable putters where I can throw it on hyzer, let it flip to flat, let it turn to anhyzer, and it will just kind of drift right forever, but it'll never drift too much where it becomes a cut roller, and it won't fade out of it at the end. And I really like that shot because my forehands are not great, like soft, like 200-foot approaches. I'm not good. I'm good at throwing a forehand like decently far, but for touches, it kind of wobbles a lot. So for backhands, if it's like 200 feet, I need a left-right shape. I'm putting this thing flat, letting it drift to anhyzer, and it's really good. Seriously recommend a PA5. Amazing understable putter. Next up, after putters, we got approach discs, wherever they ended up. I only got 3 approach discs from Prodigy. I got the A1, A2, and A3. I can't really say anything bad about these. There's no flashing. There might be a little bit of flashing on the A3. And by the way, the A1, A3 are both 400, and this one is 300 soft, the A2. Can't say anything bad about them. A1 is super overstable. I don't typically throw this for regular shots. I usually use this for forehand rollers or grenades or like tomahawks that I need to get out of trouble. That's whenever I'll pull this disc out. But for anything else, I don't throw this. Very overstable. I love using this disc for scramble shots. I can't say anything bad about it. The A2 is a staple in the Prodigy lineup. Everyone uses this. And I can't say anything bad about this disc either, really. And again, like I would say, I will get to some bad stuff once I get to higher speed discs. These are still pretty low. And yeah, I really don't have any issues with these discs, really. They all feel good. None of them have flashing so far. And it's just a staple, really. Great plastic. The plastic doesn't feel any weird or like there's no issues, no quality factors. Solid disc. A2 is a really great approach disc. And then I have the A3. The A3 is one of my favorite hand-feeling discs from Prodigy that I've ever felt. Feels really comfortable in the hands, great for forehands and backhands. Even though I'm not great with forehand approach shots, this is the disc I'll probably go to. This or the A2 I both rely on heavily. But yeah, the A2 is in 300 soft plastic and the A3 is in 400 plastic. So if I do want a little bit more skip or just something that might, I don't know. I've been using the A2 a lot more than the A3 because I want to beat it in maybe a little bit. Or I just want it to stick to the ground. But the A3 is just, it's just a great another approach disc. It's not as stable as the A2 because the lower the number, the more overstable. That's how Prodigy works. And it's the opposite for Discmania. And that confuses me sometimes whenever I see some Discmania discs anywhere. But regardless, A3, great disc. Love this disc. Moving on to mid-ranges. If I can find them all in here. I have 5 mid-ranges from Prodigy discs. And this is where I'm going to start bashing on them a little bit, but not like anything crazy. So I'm going to get this disc out of the way first. Put these down. The 500 MX1. This disc is a unit of a beef. This thing's well done beef. This thing is the most beef you can get, really, from Prodigy. The most overstable mid-range they have, and my god, this thing is super overstable to where I don't throw it. Very overstable, but I never really want to use this because I already throw the A1 that you guys already saw. And I use that for basically everything. The MX1 similar stability, but it's just a hair faster. I just don't feel like I need to bag this overstable of a mid-range. And in terms of flaw, something I do want to mention, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. The back of this rim, you can see that the tooling on the bottom, there's 3 different locations of it, right? And a lot of other discs sometimes have different like tooling areas, and it's not like too consistent. Even for the 500 plastic, the tooling on the back is not consistent. And also sometimes this disc says it's like designed in the USA, like this one does, and some just say made in the USA. So some of them even, and this is just for like the regular line, like, you know, some other discs that are like M2s or F2 or what, any disc. Sometimes they would say, you know, designed in USA, which usually means that they're probably made in China or somewhere, rather than saying made in USA, which some discs are that I have. And it's not just because they're from the Ace line, because I know the Ace lines are from China and they made that clear. But some of these discs like the MX1, this wasn't made here. But still really stable. It does feel great. The 500 plastic overall is actually my least favorite premium plastic from them. I like 400 and 750 better. But this specific 500 plastic I actually really like. And I don't know what's different between this one, between other 500 plastic discs that I have, but this one feels great. But too overstable, I don't need this really ever. That's the one disc that is truly different from the others. I have 4 discs here. I got the M model US in Duraflex plastic, the M4 right here, the M2, and the M model S in Proflex. The M2, by the way, was in 750, and this one is also in 750. 750 Spectrum, Glow Spectrum, 750 Glow Spectrum, I believe. All of these discs do the exact same thing, which kind of sucks because I'm looking for a reliable, overstable mid, and all of them just kind of fly dead straight, which is a great flight. But I don't want all 4 discs that are all different molds, like the M Model S, the M Model US, M4, and M2 to all fly dead straight. Like if I throw this like with a little bit of hyzer, it might flip to flat and just go kind of straight, which is a great flight, like I already mentioned. But I have nothing that's overstable, like in between MX1 stability and a straight one, like that nice, reliable, stable finish disc. I can't find that anywhere. And I know M1s are very inconsistent, so you're just lucky if you get an overstable one. And that goes the same way with the other side. There is no disc that is understable. The most understable disc that I actually had that was a mid-range from Prodigy was an MX3, which is supposed to be like that M1-ish type flight, which is pretty overstable. The one that I got was actually the most understable out of all of them, but I lost it. So I lost it, and I bought this M4 thinking, okay, well maybe this will be that, hyzer flip to turnover disc, which it's not. I could have got it in a base plastic, beat it up, or maybe it would just become more unstable, and I understand that, but for all the premium discs, 4 molds all fly the same. So I have a little bit of an issue with that there's not a true defined overstable mid-range, and I know the archive just dropped recently, which I haven't thrown or even felt or really seen too many videos of people throwing that at the moment. And yeah. Also, something to note with the Ace-line discs in general, there is 0 tooling on the back, which I kind of like, but at the same time, if you got like a blank, Pro Flex disc, you're not going to know if this is an M Model S, US, or OS anywhere. There's no tooling, and this could be like literally any discs, and that's how a disc is. I'll show you at the end of this video with one of my drivers that don't have any tooling, that's not even from the Ace line, and I don't even know what disc that is, and I don't even know if that's Prodigy, but the sticker said it was a Prodigy disc, so I'm just relying on that. I played again, I got it. So, and Prodigy and Play It Again Sports are kind of a duo, and you see a lot of Play It Again's carrying a ton of Prodigy discs, because that's just how they are. So I know I'm explaining a lot, but literally all these discs fly the exact same. They're dead straight. Time to move on to the fairway drivers.
Something else that I want to mention. Sorry if the mic's a little bit different because I don't have my mic plugged in, but you can see right here. It says made in the USA on the stamp, but then whenever I turn it around, I'm trying to block my phone number. Right here, it says that it's designed in the USA and the tooling on the back, so it's also inconsistent there.
Okay, so we're going to tackle the 7-speed slot right now. I have a ton of 7-speed discs, and yeah, I got a few things to say about this slot as well. Now we're on to the 7-speed or the 7 lineup from Prodigy. I have 5 of them. I have F1, F2, F5, and 2 F7s that are drastically different. The F1 I'm going to start with and just go into understable order, or overstable to understable order. And like I was just saying with the mid-range is how the tooling's different. This is a 500 F1, and there's like, it's hard to, I don't know if you can see it too well. Not tooling, but like there's like this thing right here. It's almost like a crack, and it goes across all the bottom of the discs, and you can feel them. Like it's not just like a coloring that just looks cool. You can actually feel it, and you can feel that there's like almost a crack there. And I got this new from the Prodigy warehouse itself. So this isn't from like any retailer. This is straight from Prodigy, and that's a little bit disappointing because that's definitely not something that's supposed to be there, probably. But there's a lot of that with these discs. There's a lot of weird like kind of cracks and kind of different textured on the rims, but luckily it's not too bad. I most of the time don't realize it whenever I'm holding on to it. And something else about this disc mold and this disc slot in general, I used to bag an Evader. And if you guys know Evaders, they are overstable 7-speeds that are reliably overstable. The F1 I could never fall in love with. I want a disc that goes, whenever I throw it flat, to reliably go left no matter what. And this disc does that, kinda. This disc pushes dead straight, and then right at the end it will finish. which is fine until you get into a headwind situation where this disc will just flip over. And since this is an F1, there's no like F0 or anything more overstable than an F1 in Prodigy's lineup in the 7-speed. I can never find a disc that's actually overstable in the 7-speed slot, which is quite unfortunate because I really rely on that evader that I used to throw. And for these 3 months, I could not really find any discs or anywhere online that filled that nice 7-speed overstable slot. So the F1 does do its job whenever it is, when I do put it on hyzer, it will go left, of course. It is a pretty stable disc, but it just goes straight and then it finishes. It doesn't really just push on hyzer, but it's not too bad. It's just not quite, I never found that disc quite yet in the Prodigy lineup. Now I'm going to tackle both these discs at the same time. This is the F2 and 750 plastic and the F5 and 400 plastic. Both these discs fly the exact same. This is the same issue with mid-ranges. I wanted the F2 to be kind of, I got the F2 before I got the F1 in hopes that it flies like the Evader, but then it was too flippy. So I got the F1 and it still isn't stable enough. Now it's more overstable than this, yes. The F1 is more overstable than this disc, the F2, but this disc I wanted to be that overstable slot and then it flipped just like an F5 does. This disc will hyzer flip flat the turn and it will come back at the end. Exact same with the F5. And I do want to mention the F5 has the most amount of flashing out of any disc that I've ever felt in my life. Now, I don't know how well you can hear it, but I actually had to file this down because of how ridiculous the flashing is. I know that might not be legal, but the amount of flashing that was on this disc, I don't even bag it. And since I filed it down, it's a lot subtler now. It's still there. And I filed this thing for a good like 5 to 10 minutes. You can see how big of a gap there is between right where my fingernail is right now to where this white outer line is. You can see that my fingernail gets stuck on it because of the amount of flashing that it has. It's surprising that this was as bad as it was. Now, granted, the F5 I did get from a Prodigy mystery box of chalky discs and discs that have like imperfections, and I got a lot of my first discs from that. And granted, it could just be one of those cases where it has an absurd amount of flashing and they put it in that type of box, so you get a discount for the money you get and all that stuff. So I can understand why in that concept, but still, this has a deadly amount of flashing. But in terms of the F2, these both fly the same, so I never bagged the F5 because of the flashing. And the F2, it's my hyzer flip to turnover disc. Moving on to both my F7s. Now, I just mentioned the F2 is my hyzer flip to turnover disc because I don't really throw too many forehands if I don't need to. The F7 does that, but honestly just better. I'm more comfortable throwing this disc on that kind of line because of just the simple numbering of it. F7 makes you be like, okay, so this disc is going to hyzer flip the turn. Does something similar to the F2, but still a little bit more understable, so I can put more angle on it and it'll flip more. Little flashing, I should mention, most of these fairway drivers does have a little bit of flashing. Nothing too crazy, but manageable. And yeah, this is one of my first discs from Prodigy as well. This disc I actually got before I wanted to do this challenge, and I got this disc in the winter. One of my first Prodigy discs as well. And it's in the air plastic, so it's even more understable. And I love this disc. This disc is great. If you want a hyzer flip to turnover disc, this is the one for you. And a special one here, we got a 132 gram F7 in 300 plastic. It's the Alden Harris super wicked understable fairway driver. This thing is crazy. Like, I throw this thing literally vertical, hyzer flipped and hyzer to roll. It is so understable, and I love that because I get to use this for like, if I'm like stuck in trouble, I can forehand flick a hyzer and it'll flip over to the left and turn. It's a really great and fun disc to use, and I have no issues with it. Moving on to 9-speed fairway drivers. I have 6 9-speed fairway drivers. 3 of them are FX2s, which I'll talk about first. I've always heard that Prodigy has inconsistent molds, so if you get the same mold in like a different plastic, it will fly significantly different, more different than other companies would, and that could not be further from the truth. This is a 400 FX2, 500 FX2, and 750 FX2. I have a video on my channel where I throw all three of these, and they all fly basically the same. I think the 750 might be just a hair more understable than the other two. And it is to note that the 750 and the 500 plastics have more flashing than the 400 one does for me. So neither of these are in my bag. They all fly the exact same. They're all super overstable, great forehand discs, and this 400 one's the one that I bag, and it's pretty electric. One of my favorite molds, to be honest. I love the way it feels. It also has an interesting back to it. It has like a different plastic on the back than it does the front. Front's very soft and gummy, and the back's like, you can hear it. It's two completely different textures. All three of these are very overstable, and once the FX2 either gets lost or broken in, then I have two to replace. Moving on to the other three discs, I have two FX3s and F Model S. So these FX3s, neither of them are in my bag because this disc for me is very inconsistent. This is a 400 one, and this is what I was explaining with how I have a driver that doesn't have anything on the back of it. So I don't know if this is an FX3 or an FX2 or an FX4 or not even Prodigy. So I can't tell at all what this is. This just had a sticker and it said Prodigy FX3, and it flies. If I throw it on hyzer, there's a chance that it will just stay on hyzer and float to the left, which is what I want. Sometimes I'll throw this disc on the same degrees of hyzer and it'll flip to flat and turn with no wind or anything. So it's very inconsistent for me, and I never found a good, true way that it flies. And that goes the same with this one as well, the FX3, the 500 FX3, which also, by the way, has zero tooling on the back. And this is not a Ace model disc. There's zero flashing on it, so if this disc didn't have any stamp, I would not know what it is. Which, it's so inconsistent because sometimes there's a certain array of tooling on the back, and sometimes there's a different array of tooling. Then there's like 2, 3, or 4 different ways of tooling that they do for different molds for different plastics, which I know that's being like super, I'm looking at it so closely and it's like no one would look at that, but this is supposed to be a pretty in-detail video, and I'll show you guys a little bit more clips of what I mean. I'll throw them up here, how some of them have different toolings and some of them don't have any tooling, like this one. Like there's just nothing. There's zero tooling anywhere. But with zero tooling, there's zero flashing as well. Not really, but there is no flashing on this disc, so it does feel pretty good. Even though I don't love the 500 plastic as much as I like the 400 or the 750, this one feels pretty good. I like this 500 plastic feel, but doesn't really do what I wanted to do. Never found the correct flight that I wanted it, so same thing with this one. I don't bag them. Disc that I do bag, that I do find very consistent and shocking, is the F Model S in ProFlex. I got this disc because when I first ordered the FX2 and I saw the flight numbers, I thought it wasn't going to be as stable as I wanted it to be. So I got this disc because I saw the parting line was very high, and I'm like, okay, so this is very overstable, so I'm going to get it just in case my FX2 doesn't fly as overstable as I want it to. I know this will, because I got this disc from Play It Again Sports while I ordered my FX2s on Prodigy's website, I believe, or I might have gotten it from a different manufacturer or retailer like that. Not different manufacturer, from a different retailer. The F Model S is sick. This is like a beat-in Firebird is what I think it's this disc. Like I can throw this flat and it will just kind of slowly, gradually go to hyzer and then just kind of glide its way down to the ground. Same thing if I throw it on hyzer. It will just kind of glide and stay on hyzer. It will never really flip. It will just glide forever. And same thing with anhyzers. Like if I throw an anhyzer, it will just glide and just stay on that anhyzer nice ride and then finish at the end. Really great disc. I did not know I was going to like this disc as much as I do right now. I definitely throw this disc. This disc in my brain is what I think an FX3 should do, but it doesn't. So I got, that's what I use this disc for. Great disc. Does have a decent amount of flashing. Also zero tooling on the back, but I think that's most Ace-line discs, except for one. So yeah, that's all my fairway drivers. I do like my fairway drivers overall in general with all the selection that I have, but there are still a few gaps that I'm missing that I wish I had for specific shots. But overall, I'm pretty happy with Prodigy's lineup of fairway drivers. Moving on to hybrid drivers. So I only have one hybrid driver because I don't see a need for myself, oh, there it goes, to bag really too many. Actually, I only got this one out of the starting chalky disc box that I talked about earlier. And the one disc that I do have is the H4V2 in air plastic, which is odd, but this is my go-to roller disc. Amazing roller disc. I can throw this flat and it will get to that nice angle and it will just go forever. I'm usually someone, whenever I'm throwing rollers, is whenever it's a low ceiling and I want decent distance, I don't really need the shape too much. And if I do need to shape, I would either throw my F7 or my super ultra lightweight F7 Air, pink one. But for distance rollers, this is literally my go-to, and that's all I throw this disc for. Literally my favorite roller disc I've ever thrown. A little bit of flashing, of course, it's Prodigy. And one thing I do want to mention, which I'll probably show better pictures a little bit later or somewhere in the video, I don't know, is that this tooling is massive. It does say made in the USA, so I can trust it on that. PDGA approved. They're huge. Like, this is the only plastic. Maybe it's just the air, but even with the F7 air, it's not this big. It's just so inconsistent. And the reason why it bothers me is because sometimes I put my hand on the disc and I can feel that flashing in my fingers. That's why I don't really love Discraft discs, because I can feel that tooling, and it's just something I need to think about before I throw. But luckily, I don't throw the roller too much, and if I do, I'll grab it in a good spot, hold on to it there, and hopefully execute the roller. But my only hybrid driver, no complaints about this disc other than a few things right that I just mentioned. And time to move on to distance drivers. So in terms of the D series, or not the X series, I have 4 distance drivers. I got the D3, D model OS, D2, and I believe the Reverb. Let's start off with the simpler ones out of the bunch. We got the D2 in 500 plastic, which I'm starting to notice now. I think the 500 plastic doesn't really have tooling, but that's not the case for my MX1, which does have tooling, which I showed you a little bit earlier. This disc is great though. Nice, overstable, not super overstable to where I feel like I can't really throw it, because I only throw it max 400 right now, and probably on average like 350. It does great. It's not too stable, it's not too understable, it's reliable in the wind, but I am a little bit worried if it is giving like a good, 20-mile-per-hour wind gusts that sometimes happen where I live, that this is not stable enough. So I might club up to a D1. Eventually I'll buy it, maybe, or just something that's more overstable that I can absolutely trust in wind. But for what this disc does, it's great. No complaints, no flashing on that one. Then I got probably one of my favorite and most used discs that I have, and that's the D3 400. I got this as one of my first discs that I got from Prodigy as well. And this disc is pretty flippy now. I don't think it used to be this flippy when I first got it. Like, I can throw this on hyzer, it'll flip up the flat and turn to anhyzer and come back at the end. So it's like my ultimate bomber disc, but even with my improving arm speed, this is starting to become a little bit too understable, which is not a bad thing, because then it could be my super distance roller if I really need it. So yeah, but zero complaints, mild flashing, tooling, a little bit different again. There's only tooling on one side of the disc, not anywhere else, which is so confusing why it's so different. That's how it is, but I love this disc. Seriously great. Love throwing this on like hyzers to flip up the flat when I'm throwing uphill. Really good disc. Now we have our last 2 discs from the driver series, not the X. The X's I still have left to do. First one I'm going to go over is the D model OS. Now, I mentioned earlier that I believe the Ace-line discs have 0 tooling. This is not the case here. We have tooling in 3 different locations. Right here, and right here. Now, of course, the Ace-line discs are not manufactured in the US, and that's very well known, and I completely understand that. However, this is my water disc now. I like the Duraflex plastic a lot, so I do have a thing for this plastic, but it's just not really a disc that I don't know, this thing flies different every time I throw it. So it's not reliable. It's like the FX3. I don't really bag it, but I do have it for water shots if I really need it. Not really much else to be said. Last driver, we got the Reverb, I believe. This is just like the same situation with that other disc, the FX3, the orange one that played against Sports Stamp, which is also what this one is. This has 0 tooling in the back. Literally 0. And I can't tell what this disc is, and I'm just praying that that sticker's correct. That is a Prodigy 400 Reverb. And Whatever this disc is, even if it's a Reverb D1, Zeus, whatever it is from any other company, this disc is great. Love this disc. It's a little bit less overstable D2. This could be a Falcor, honestly, because I think it flies great. Because I throw it flat, and it will just kind of go straight with the finish at the end. Just kind of like how the F1 flies like, but just with the distance driver. So this is probably one of my go-to distance drivers if I just need something reliably, like far but not understable. This is my go-to thrower. Moving on to my last two discs from the Prodigy lineup, and I'll conclude this video and talk about a few other things. I only have two X series discs. I have an X4 and an X2. Let's get the X2 out of the way first. This disc fills the slot between the Reverb and the D3, where it's more understable than the Reverb, but more stable than the D3. But unfortunately, this disc is so shallow, and that's what the X series disc is all about. It's a shallower rim, so it's very shallow in my hands. Even though I have pretty small hands, this is still a little bit too thin for me. And this 750X2 is just not a disc I throw really too much, unless I really need that specific stability. It is in the bag, but I don't throw it too often. And the last disc in my bag is the X4. Now, contrary to the X2, I love the hand feel this disc a lot. And this disc is not even that understable for it being an X2. It probably flies similar to like my X2. Again, X2, X4, and they fly the same. That's kind of a similar concept with a lot of Prodigy discs. How the numbering system just kind of doesn't really matter. It's supposed to matter, but it's kind of, sometimes it could be like, not quite true. But this X4, if you guys decide to get an X4, this thing doesn't really fly too far. Every other disc that I've thrown, even the D model OS, the D3, the D2, the X2, the Reverb, all go significantly further than this. This disc almost flies like the same speed as like an FX2 speed, like a 9 speed. And it doesn't really go that like extra 30 feet or so that I get out of distance drivers over fairway drivers. And it's kind of disappointing because this is one of my favorite feeling hand feel discs that I've felt in a while, but this doesn't fly anywhere. So that's unfortunate. And yeah, that's all I have for all my discs. And I'll explain to you guys a little bit more in depth of what I think about Prodigy, and I'll let you guys know a little bit more right now. So now that I'm back inside, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit more of what I'm going to do with Prodigy discs. Since Prodigy Discs is the main company that I throw, like right here, this right here, this stack, is all discs that are not Prodigy. This disc, all those discs right there, and everything that's in this bag are all discs that are not from Prodigy. So I think what I'm going to do for the future now is I'm going to continue just throwing Prodigy for a little bit longer, maybe until I feel like it. I'm not going to put a specific time on it, but since I'm starting up college on Monday, which I'm trying to get this thing uploaded by, I don't know if that's going to be true or not, but I won't be able to play as much as I would normally play because I try to get in a round or two a week and maybe a practice session also like one or two a week. And I'm not going to be playing as much as I want to, so I'm not going to go and spend any more money on other discs that I don't need or don't really want to either, because now I've been throwing Prodigy only. I know my bag really well, better than I have ever known any disc ever. I know so many discs in there that I trust more than any disc that I have that would fill the same exact slot, but I know what those do rather than those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick with Prodigy only for a little while longer, and we'll see where it takes me. I feel like one of the best things you could do is do something like this where you trust one company's discs only for a little while, so you get really familiar with their plastics, their molds, your favorite molds. You can beat in discs to a specific level, then get a new one that'll fly how your old one was. And I think that's all very important. And that's what I believe made me a lot better player than I used to be about 3 months ago. And I think having a mixed bag is also, of course, great. Like if you have a disc from Prodigy, then a disc from Discraft, Innova, ThoughtSpace, Viking discs. It could be literally anyone. And you have a mixed bag, of course, that's great. And that is what most people do. But I think it's also important to really learn a specific company and see what they're going for, especially someone like Prodigy, because they have this numbering system where it's like D1, D2, D3, D4. where D1 is the most overstable, D4 is the most understable. And even though that's not always the case, like I mentioned in the video, it's a good tell in understanding what the discs are supposed to do and how they're supposed to fly. With other companies like an Eagle or a Destroyer or a Buzz or a Zone, it's like if some random, if some newer player was like, oh, this is a Buzz, and maybe that's someone who's never played disc golf, they're like, oh, well, what's a Buzz? Well, Buzz is like a very straight, maybe slightly overstable once it's new, mid-range. And they're like, oh, okay, so what does the Comet do? Well, it's also mid-range from Discraft, and you got to go explain all that. Whenever with Prodigy, you can just be like, okay, this is an M3. Okay, so what is that? It's a mid-range, and 1 through 4 is the stability. And I know Discraft tried something similar without the stability rating, but no one really followed it. But you can understand, like, D2 is supposed to be more understable than D1, rather than a Force is supposed to be more overstable than Zeus. Who's supposed to know that? You know what I mean? So I know it's super simple and super nitpicky again, but I think the numbering system is a good idea because I've never once been like, oh, dude, I gotta go throw my D3 rather than, oh, yes, I get to throw a destroyer just because of the name. Like, I'm just happy on how it flies and what it does for me rather than, oh, this cool name, whatever. And I understand, like, people are different, but it's like saying, oh, I'm about to hit my 9 iron, but instead of a 9 iron, you call it like the cowboy. All right, this distance is perfect for the cowboy, but not good for titanium. You know what I mean? It's just like, I don't know. I'm nitpicking too far. It doesn't even really matter, but it's just something that I think the numbering system is a good idea. But sometimes it's not perfect because sometimes you have more stable runs of D2s that are more stable than D1s. You have, PA3s that are more overstable than PA1s, and you have M4s that are more overstable than M1s. So it's not perfect, and I definitely can see that with especially my mid ranges, how all of them pretty much go straight. I got M4 and M2. They're just so straight. They're the same disc, and yeah. So I'll let you guys know a little bit more of what I think, and if I have anything to add, I'll throw it in the video wherever. Thank you guys for watching. I'm going to be sticking with Prodigy for a little bit and let you guys know a few more things, and hopefully I can get some more videos out. It's been a pretty busy summer for me because I've been working on my second channel. If you guys don't know, I have a second channel. It's called CDS Gaming, where I primarily upload Call of Duty Zombies videos. If you guys are interested, feel free to check me out there. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.